Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. Glad you're here for the conversation. We just got through Kamala Harris's first interview. She brought a chaperone, though. She brought a bodyguard. She brought a babysitter, however you want to look at that. And she brought a lot of, well, BS, frankly. I don't know how quite else to put it. She said her values have never changed, although she's flip-flopped on everything. She wants a border wall. She doesn't want a border wall. She wants to end fracking. She doesn't want to end fracking. She wants an EV mandate. She doesn't want that. The fact of the matter is she doesn't have any real convictions, no underlying principles, just political points of view that seem to be expedient when convenient. Joining me to sort this out, Kevin Roberts. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Steve, it's my pleasure. Love your work, as you know, and love your audience. And we got a republic to save, so it's great to spend some time with you.
We do have a country to save, and I think that's exactly right. First of all, reflect on the interview. There was nothing there. It was empty. It was all crunch and no substance, right? I mean, it was embarrassing that somebody that wants to be president of the United States has to bring along a supervisor, if you will. I've never seen anything quite like it. The first interview Hillary Clinton did was with 60 Minutes. The first interview Donald Trump did was 60 Minutes. And here we end up at CNN with somebody standing there to help you out. What do you make of it?
Well, it's really embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the vice president. It's embarrassing for the governor of Minnesota. It's embarrassing for Dana Bash. Look, leading the largest conservative public policy organization in the world, I know going into watching that interview that I probably wasn't going to hear anything in terms of policy that we at Heritage agreed with. But what I was looking forward to was a substantive policy conversation. I mean, even Hillary Clinton, to your point, Steve, regularly did those kinds of interviews. I was reflecting yesterday, Bill Clinton, with whom I disagreed on almost everything, always leaned into those substantive policy conversations. And I think what it shows is not just a vacuousness on behalf of the vice president and, frankly, the interviewer, but also it shows a real contempt for those of us, whether we're center right or center left, who just want to have a conversation this year about issues and about policies, even if we might disagree with them.
Well, I think it's a great point you made, Kevin, because, look, I didn't agree with Bill Clinton on a number of things. I didn't agree with Hillary Clinton on a number of things, but she was not an imbecile. And I'm sorry to say that, but look what we're dealing with. We're dealing with somebody who cannot articulate a point of view. I mean, can you imagine Kamala Harris sitting down with FDR, LBJ, JFK, even sitting down having a conversation about policy with Bill Clinton or any of them? She's not capable, that's clear. And as you call her, she is dangerously liberal because that's where she tends to go, to that San Francisco side of the ledger, doesn't she?
She does. And as we started this website, dangerouslyliberal.com, earlier this week, our motivation at Heritage was actually to bring some more policy substance into the conversation. And so what the website provides is a series of resources for people to understand what the vice president's policy record is. That policy record, by the way, is, as you and your audience know well, is one that has undermined the American dream. Whether it is a terrible performance on the economy by spending way too much money by the federal government, whether it is spending way too much money on so-called green energy, a policy, by the way, that they're running away from, and she ran away from last night because she's very worried about key states and key voters in places like Pennsylvania, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, who understand that Harris's policies have undermined their own prosperity, their own American dream. But most of all, Steve, I will say that the point of our website, dangerouslyliberal.com, is to inject into this election cycle a conversation, an understanding about policies. We don't care whether someone is a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, somewhere in the middle. We just believe at Heritage that what has been sorely lacking in this campaign is an honest-to-God conversation about the policies that matter. This election ought to turn on the top three things on the minds of Americans. Number one, the economy. Number two, the lawlessness at the southern border. And number three, the lawlessness that we see in our cities and increasingly in suburbs. You can go to that website and get that information.
It is dangerouslyliberal.com. I've been looking at it here this morning before I began talking to you. So let's talk about Bidenomics, all right? So she was asked about Bidenomics in the interview. She said basically nothing. But what we do know is that families in this country, if they compare what $100 put in the grocery bag 4 years ago compared to today, there is no comparison. When they look at their electric bill, my God, I'm looking at an electric bill here at almost $800. It's double what it was 4 years ago. If I go to the gas pump, yeah, gas prices have come down in the last few weeks a little bit, but I'm still $1.25, $1.50 higher than I was 4 years ago. There just is no comparison. And yet, Bidenomics, she was the cheerleader for it over and over again. Now, of course, she probably stands opposed to it. At least that's what she'll say. The point being is their economic track record is abysmal, to say the least.
It is. She's not only the cheerleader, but she was the tie-breaking vote as the presiding officer of the Senate on some of that key legislation. And so while she's running away from that record, we have to understand she was part and parcel of it. She was bragging months ago, about being the last person in the room regarding that terrible and tragic Afghanistan withdrawal. And now, of course, is running away from that. But I want to home in on one thing that you mentioned, one example. We've spent a lot of time this summer talking about increased prices for groceries and for gas. That's 100% right. But what I would encourage your audience and their family members and friends to home in on over the next months is what you mentioned, our electricity bills. Why? Because it reveals two things. Number one, not just the overriding problem of inflation, but number two, the overriding problem of what happens when you decide you're going to subsidize energy sources that are not yet mature for the market, wind and solar and green energy. Those things can be fine if someone likes that idea. But the problem is Harris's policies have caused our electric bills to go up. And I just think that at some point, people who are still trying to make a decision about which candidate they're going to vote for will be looking at those things, their electric bill, their gas prices, grocery prices, and begin to connect the dots, as much as the vice president would prefer that they not do that.
Exactly right. I want to shift to something else that you touched on. And again, the website is dangerouslyliberal.com. Look at it. It's very telling. You have 10.3 million people coming over the border illegally. I think that number could be significantly higher. But we've all been seeing the videos out of Aurora, Colorado, this Venezuelan gang or gangs taking over several different apartment buildings. The governor of Colorado not trying to downplay that. Oh, that's exaggerated. It's not real. Of course it's real. And they say, well, if it is, it's isolated. It's a city of 400,000 people. It's not that big a deal. If you have a city of 400,000 people and you have half a dozen apartment complexes being taken over by dangerous gangs, I'd say that's quite important, Kevin.
It's crucial. And look, the importance of that example beyond the obvious, which is that it's tragic and ridiculous that it's happening anywhere, especially in the United States and especially in a beautiful place like Aurora, Colorado, is that this is the result of policies that the vice president is running away from. And Governor Polis, who, of course, was a featured speaker at the DNC, has spent a lot more time mischaracterizing and demonizing the policies of the right when he should be spending time taking the vice president of the United States to task over being the architect of the lawlessness at the southern border, the architect of the lawlessness in our cities. If Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance prosecute that case against this vice president, who is frankly being very dishonest about her role in all of this, then I think the American people will realize that good policy and virtuous elected officials, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, can bring to an end what is literally gang violence in an American city. And unfortunately, Steve, just to sum up here, that kind of thing is happening all over the United States. As we've been saying for 3.5 years at Heritage, every county is a border county. Every city is a border city. All you have to do to prove that is go ask Americans what they think about that, and they understand who's responsible.